Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us. Just a couple of quick comments with respect to maybe the happenings over the last number of days, as well as our First Minister's meeting that we had today via video and even some of the discussion coming out of last week. It's been Saskatchewan's position from the very beginning that we need to work together as subnational leaders, as a national government, but all of us as Canadians, work together to de-escalate the conversation, de-escalate any conversation around potential tariffs, not escalate that conversation. And so Saskatchewan has been working very diligently, not only alongside our federal government, but working with meetings with various contacts that we have acquired over the last number of years in both the Trump administration, incoming Trump administration, as well as governors, senators, and House representatives. And we would encourage the business community in Saskatchewan as well to reach out and touch their American colleagues, business colleagues, so that they also can speak to policy and decision makers throughout the U.S. as to the importance of and the integration of the North American economy, and how through that integration of the North American economy we actually are providing food security, providing energy security, providing manufacturing security, and in many ways adding to our collective general security. From Saskatchewan's perspective, the potential review that would be happening by the Trump administration would reach us out to April the 1st. There's also the comments with respect to potential tariffs that may be applied by February the 1st. And I think it's important for us to prepare for all, but to not take into account or comment too much on what might be hypothetical at this space. As I say often, is we need to take what President Trump says very seriously, but not always do you take it literally, as we see just there. There's a little bit of crossing of what the Trump administration is moving forward with versus what was said. Saskatchewan has always been supportive of the tariffs, the targeted tariffs, the very specific, precise targeted tariffs that are not implemented to have an impact in the economy in any way. These would be the counter tariffs, pardon me, by the federal government on goods that would be imported from the U.S. They're very targeted. They're very small, a couple $1 million, on a couple $1 billion of imports, Canadian imports from the U.S. But they are not there to have an impact on the economy. They're there to change the views and really change the hearts and minds of specific policy decision makers within the U.S. We did this first through the country of origin labeling dispute that we had over a decade ago. We did these very precise, targeted countermeasures a few years ago when we had the steel tariffs under the previous Trump administration. But I would add, in that case, we also made some significant changes as a nation when it comes to imported steel from countries like China. And so we need to ensure that we are working all fronts with respect to some of the concerns that our largest trading partner has. So Saskatchewan is supportive of those very small, targeted tariffs that are there to change the minds of U.S. decision makers. What we have seen since last week is some of the language change to broad-based dollar-for-dollar tariffs being, counter tariffs being imposed. Saskatchewan's not in support of that. The broad-based counter tariffs are escalating. The entire conversation around tariffs will be hurtful to Canadians and will be hurtful to the entirety of North Americans, and ultimately to that North American energy and food manufacturing security that we want to achieve. Export tariffs put on by our own national government on products that we might produce here in Saskatchewan or anywhere else in Canada. Saskatchewan most certainly is not supportive of and would be working actively to ensure that an export tariff couldn't be applied on Saskatchewan products. And we're looking at what opportunities provinces have exercising their provincial jurisdiction as we speak when it comes to the potential of export tariffs down the way. And so the very targeted tariffs, small targeted tariffs that don't have an impact on our economy. We have had discussions with the federal government about our support for those broad-based tariffs. Dollar-for-dollar tariffs with the U.S. is not in Canadians' best interest, nor should export tariffs ever be considered. by our government. What we need to do, and what I will continue to do as a subnational leader, is to engage, yes, alongside our federal government, but to engage also as a province of Saskatchewan with all of any and all contacts that we have with the Trump administration, with governors, with senators, with House representatives, and as I said, I encourage those in the business community to reach out to their business colleagues south of the border. And I think we need to remember to always keep in mind that we can only impact what we can impact. We are doing what we can to influence what the president's decision might be, and our hope is that he would not be instituting tariffs. But at the end of the day, what we can impact are some of the concerns that President Trump has put forward with respect to border security. You've seen a border security announcement in this province, other provinces, and a significant border security announcement by our federal government, showing a demonstrable investment. I think, I would hope, demonstrable results along not only the 49th parallel, but our airport border crossings, as well as the cargo port crossings that we have. We are heading towards a review of our USMCA trade agreement, and so the engagement that is occurring today is going to be, I think, helpful and beneficial and positive, not only in having the tariffs not applied or removed sooner rather than later, but will also be helpful as we go into, I believe it's 2026, when we do a review of our trade agreement. And many premiers, myself included, have consistently encouraged the federal government that at some point our 2% military spend, or our NATO commitment, is going to be part of this conversation, and we should be working very diligently together to ensure that we are able to achieve that sooner rather than later. But at the end of the day, the most important thing that we can do as Canadians, in whatever position we have, is to engage with whoever we can south of the border, and display and put forward the broader economic opportunity that we have as not just as Canadians, but as North Americans. The broader economic opportunity we have, and what we do in building towards an energy secure continent, building towards, and often take it for granted, a food secure continent, building towards the manufacturing security, and ultimately together building towards the general security that North Americans enjoy. So that's a summary of maybe the last number of days, just a little bit of a summary of Saskatchewan's position on a number of fronts as we work alongside our provincial counterparts and our federal government in building a stronger relationship, a stronger continental relationship across North America in what is some pretty uncertain and very challenging times, I must admit. Any questions?
Signing on to last week's accord because they didn't think you were uncomfortable with. Obviously, you suggested that there's not necessarily a tit for tat retaliation that you want. But in terms of strategy so far, are you relatively comfortable with it? Can you give us a clear sense?
Well, I think I'm comfortable in the fact that we don't have tariffs on Saskatchewan exports today. I'm not comfortable in the fact that I'm hopeful, but not comfortable in the fact that that's going to be the case for many days into the future. And so I won't speak for Premier Smith, but I would say that I would share the concern she has around not only tariffs being applied by the U.S. president, but should some of that tariff environment be what it is, for the very thought or initiative for any type of export tariffs to be applied to any Canadian goods. For example, should the Canadian government consider applying export tariffs to electricity that's being exported out of the province of Quebec? I think Quebec would be very quick to say not without our approval, and there are constitutional and provincial jurisdictional rights that do allow for provinces to certainly to have a role to play in any of that conversation. We would share, I think, that very stance that we should not be applying export tariffs to products that Canadians are producing, and I think that is part of the reason behind some of Premier Smith's comments. And so we would share that concern and very much are looking actively at how we as a province can ensure that that would never happen to Saskatchewan potash, Saskatchewan oil, or Saskatchewan uranium, or even our agricultural products that we ship south of the border for that matter. So just to answer more your question, we don't have tariffs today. I don't know what that'll look like in the future, but we're doing our level best, as I said from the very get-go, to we are advocating and working alongside our federal government. That being said, do we agree with all that's being discussed or thought of by the federal government? Not necessarily, but we're also doing our level best to engage with American policymakers as a province of Saskatchewan, and thankfully that has been an effort of the Saskatchewan government over the last number of years, is to build that that Rolodex, build those relationships. I left one piece out, and maybe I just mentioned it now, and I apologize. Saskatchewan also is the least dependent province when it comes to exports into the U.S. 55% of our exports go into the United States of America. That is, if not the lowest, would be very much tied for the lowest dependency on the U.S. market of any province in Canada. That's not by accident. That is due to partially what we produce in Saskatchewan and the global need, partially due to the business community in Saskatchewan and the effort that they have made to diversify those exports around the world. We do export products to over 160 countries each and every day. But that effort has also been supported by this government, and I would say very much supported the last number of years with the not only missions on the ground in countries of interest, but with actual physical presence of trade offices in 9 countries around the world. And so this is another opportunity for us, and we will be over the course of the next number of days, weeks, and months, re-intensifying our efforts on trade diversification and looking for opportunities for some of the product that currently might flow into the United States of America to ensure that we have capacity to move it to other areas where we can. Not all products is that opportunity available, but many of those products that opportunity is available.
I'll just one quick one for me. Can you tell us where you see the pressure points for Saskatchewan product? You've obviously cited oil and gas as one. There's a lot of talk about what they might do with canola, with Robert Kennedy Jr.'s position on oil seeds and things like that. Is that a legit concern, or is that something that you put in the category of we ought to wait and see what actually happens as opposed to a lot of the talk that you're hearing?
Well, I think the concern can be is if, worst case scenario is that Canada and maybe other countries are facing a 25% across the board tariff. That isn't hard to figure out. We do about $27, $28 billion worth of exports to the U.S., and so you can do the math on what that means to our export value and ultimately to our GDP and to the provincial bottom line, revenue line, and to, not only businesses' bottom line, but all of those that are working in those industries that are generating wealth. And this is, market access, trade agreements. These are all so very important to a province and a country that is an exporting province and country, and we certainly are in Saskatchewan, and we certainly are in Canada. And so, that's the macro impact. How that falls out in each individual commodity can be much more challenging. For example, almost virtually all, if not all, of our oil goes to the U.S. The Americans actually buy that oil to some degree at a discount, add value to it, and provide it as gasoline, diesel to not only Americans but others around the world, and we're displacing Venezuelan oil at the same time. And so, that's an example of a very positive trade and market access relationship where not only are they utilizing and are we benefiting from the production of that oil, but American citizens have jobs and are benefiting from the refinement and value added of that product as well, and providing energy security to in part to our continent in doing so. There isn't a lot of other options for oil because we as a nation have restricted our options to get that same product to Tidewater or to get it to refineries in Eastern Canada. And, we all know the story behind Northern Gateway and Energy East. And, those are 2 projects that I think we as Canadians should certainly become advocates for sooner rather than later, so that we are energy independent not only on a continental basis, but also ensuring that we have access to other markets for, what is a very very important economic driver in Saskatchewan and Alberta, of course, but across Canada as well in the folks that it employs. When it comes to ag commodities, we have many other markets where ag commodities can find their way to, and they would ultimately have to be replaced by something else in the U.S. market. And so, the commodities like canola oil, canola meal, canola seed, wheat, and so on. We want broad market access to every market that we can ultimately have. But they are global commodities, and they will move around between those markets. And we've seen this is not our first, as the province of Saskatchewan, this is not our first trip down either a financial tariff or a non-financial tariff conversation. We have these conversations on phytosanitary standards and whatnot with China from time to time. We've had similar conversations on some of the pulse crops that go into countries like India, for example. However, this is our largest trading partner, and it's a much broader conversation than just a couple of products going into to a country. And so it's a very, very important conversation for us to be part of. And our entire focus on this, as I said, is to de-escalate the entirety of the conversation around tariffs, and to refocus on really what I think are some of the opportunities that have been provided by the president. And I call them opportunities and we are taking him up on his comments around border security. That benefits Canadians. That benefits Canadians in a big way. And we're seeing larger and larger drug busts, for example, in our province. And those drugs are coming from somewhere, whether it's across the 49th parallel or in one of our ports. And so, anything that we're doing as Canadians and as provinces to secure our borders, not only for Americans, but to secure our borders for Canadians, I think is something we should seriously be looking at, and we are. I would say there's going to be some different opinions at the subnational level, and I would say there always is, and that isn't a bad thing. And that doesn't mean that we're not going to advocate alongside one another, not only for our respective subnational area, our province or our territory, but also to advocate as Canadians. And we do need to advocate as Canadians behind either this federal government or whoever might be next. And so there's differences all the time. And I would suggest if when it comes to export tariffs, if you say, compare these two statements. If you're going to put an export tariff on oil and potash, Saskatchewan's going to have an issue with that, and we're going to try to defend that and prevent it. If you change that and say, well, actually, we're going to put an export tariff on auto parts and electricity exports, then you're going to hear from Premiers Ford and Legault. And so you change out the name of what. And that's why I say is we would be against all export tariffs because they're counterproductive. They're escalating the conversation around tariffs, and they are in no way, is it our opinion that the Canadian government should be taxing the very products that are creating wealth for Canadians, and in our case, we're concerned with the people of Saskatchewan. So we don't think export tariffs are the answer. It's pushing the conversation the wrong direction. It's hurting Canadians and hurting North Americans. By the same factor, we don't think that the tariffs that are being proposed by President Trump are in any way helpful either. But I think we can find a way through those through some targeted initiatives that don't have as large impact on the broader economy and Canadians and North Americans, and a whole lot of dialogue on what the impact is across the 49th parallel on how we create our wealth and how we create that continental energy and food security.
What specific targeted tariffs would you be in favor of? So just to clarify, you said there's not across the board, but there are some targeted tariffs that you'd be in favor of. Can you elaborate specifically on which?
No, I can't. And here's why is, I'm getting into that hypothetical space at the moment. The federal government has been working on a list of tariffs that would target certain policymakers and decision makers in the U.S. Again, this is mimicking what we did when we had a country of origin labeling challenge a number of years ago. What we did, part of what we did when we had the steel and aluminum tariffs a few years ago as well, is you have a very small relatively small, still big numbers, but a relatively small batch of tariffs that are targeting geographic areas where U.S. policy and decision makers are being impacted. And the goal there is to ensure that the people making the decisions understand the importance of trade with Canada. And so I don't want to release that list. It's a federal list, and we don't have any tariffs right now. And there's varying opinions or statements out there on when and if we may even have U.S. tariffs applied. And I say that we'd be in favor of the targeted list because it has been talked about publicly. It doesn't have an impact on the economy. It's proven to be part of a broader suite that can help us be effective in the ongoing conversation on removing tariffs altogether. But I don't want to get into what they would look like until they actually might be needed. I don't have a job loss. I've met with the Saskatchewan Chamber of Commerce and a number of other stakeholders as well, but it would be significant. And I would say some would be immediate and some would be drawn out over a period of time as the impacts of the tariffs started to build. That's why I think it's so very important for us to do what we can to ensure that they either don't come into effect or in effect for a very, very short period of time. Part of that is targeting specific decision makers in the U.S. with the tariffs we talked about, but part of that is engaging as well. And not everyone is always aware of just how integrated the Saskatchewan, the Canadian economy is with the U.S. That 49th parallel is there, yes. But most of the products that we use and consume and export have crossed that parallel in some way, shape, or form in their making. We create this continental energy security, food security, manufacturing security environment together. We build things alongside the Americans, not in spite of them or not in any way even in competition with them. Sometimes it's alongside them. Sorry, Alex.
Hearing you talk about how you're not happy with the federal messaging right now. Is this you moving away from
No. There's always going to be differences, at that table, and there should be. I mean, we're a pretty diverse nation, and I've been never one really to hide the differences that I have with this particular federal government. And I certainly have, some differences with them on this conversation, but that doesn't mean that we don't, work collaboratively, certainly where we can for the greater good. I can assure you the Prime Minister doesn't want these tariffs implemented. I don't want these tariffs implemented, and I don't know of one Canadian, or really for that matter, very many North Americans that want these tariffs implemented either. And so I wouldn't say this, whatever you want to, you call the engagement that we have. I think I've been very clear with what Saskatchewan's position is all along, and been very clear with, part of Saskatchewan's position is to, work alongside whoever the federal government is in the engagement efforts that they have. But we have our own as well. And I think today, part of that is we're going to refocus and amplify our efforts in the non-U.S. markets as well.
You mentioned potentially using powers within the provincial realm to mitigate any kind of potential tariffs the Canadian government implements on exports. What would those tools look like? What are you exploring?
Just looking at all options. We don't believe the export tariff should be considered in any way, shape, or form, and I'm not confident. I have concerns that at some level, whatever, maybe not even the elected level, but at some level, export tariffs or export restrictions might be at some point considered in this conversation, and we'll be protecting Saskatchewan residents when it comes to the natural resources, which is under the provincial jurisdiction, and how we produce them and where we export them to tariff-free.
How is that a unified approach that seems to be the opposite?
That would be one of the differences that I alluded to, but it's by no means doesn't mean that we continue to work together where we can in advocating for the removal of all of the tariffs. The goal is the removal of any tariffs that might come on. Unfortunately, today we don't have them. And so you might not agree with every approach. My job is to take care of Saskatchewan residents and Saskatchewan opportunity, but to also, I think our job collectively as Canadians is, to work together, certainly work together where we can, and that's what we're doing on this file. And there will be differences, but those aren't differences that were, means that we stop working together to advocate for the full removal of any potential tariffs that might arrive.
I'm just wondering if you're concerned whether Canada is focusing on the right priorities, because we're hearing from Trump a lot of talk about border security and the amount of fentanyl coming into the U.S. Is that being addressed by the Premier and Prime Minister here?
Yeah, I would hope, and I'm of the firm belief, and this is why we, had made the decisions that we made around our provincial additions to border security with, refocusing 16 officers in the short term, some airplanes, some drones, some other resources, K-9 units, for example, to be refocused in that area north of the border. Have discussions with Governor Gianforte as well as Governor Armstrong in North Dakota on some of the similar initiatives that they're doing south of the border. But we made that decision to make for a safer environment for our province, and actually by consequence a safer environment for Canadians, whether that be fentanyl that might be crossing in between border crossings or might be crossing at border crossings at times. You have K-9 units and planes that are spotting any irregular activity. Might it be with some of the projected or proposed changes that we see the President making and signing into order the other day around some of the illegal migrants that are in the U.S. today. We want to ensure that our border is secure regardless of what decisions are made south of that border. And so that's why we made that announcement, and that's why part of that announcement is, if needed, we can ramp up those officers to a number of 95 and many more resources if required. And we're still looking at, is that going to be enough? And we'll continue to monitor and listen to our frontline folks in that space. You add to that, and again, with the federal government, some of the collaborative discussion we're having is, where's the $1.3 billion going that they had committed to border security? Or can some of those drones that they had committed to actually be deployed along the Saskatchewan border? Do they have availability of even some additional K-9 units, which are entirely helpful, in the parking lots and in and around the area close to that border? That all benefits us, and it all benefits us as Saskatchewan residents and community members. If we can stop a load of fentanyl or whatever that might be from getting into a community like Estevan or Regina or Saskatoon, Prince Albert, Moose Jaw, that's all of net benefit to us. And if we're doing that collectively along the 49th parallel, it's a net benefit to all of us as Canadians. That was identified as a major issue by the President. That's, I think, an opportunity for us, and I think Canada, we see, is taking that opportunity to address what was identified by, and I would say, in fairness, it's probably identified by many Canadians as an opportunity for investment as well. We should be talking about that at every conversation that we have. It's an identified issue by the President. It's an identified issue by Canadians. Rather than talking about what level of retaliatory tariffs everyone is looking at and escalating the conversation around tariffs, we should be focusing on the issues that have been raised. Our 2% NATO funding is going to be an issue that has been raised and will continue to be raised, and I think we have to have, as a Canadians, a very serious discussion around what our funding level commitment is, and can we advance that? And I think not all potentially, but I would say many premiers would be open to being that discussion as Canadians. In just over a year, we're going to enter into a review of the trade deal that we had, the USMCA deal, and I think the engagement that you see happening now is going to be beneficial as we find our way into that deal as well. So the engagement is the key to success moving forward. But to your question on maybe not specifically the Canadian government, but each of us as Canadians, and I would include the media that are telling the Canadian story through our outlets in this, is we should focus on the opportunities that we have to not just achieve some of the concerns that might be raised by the President, but some of these how achieving something like increased border security can benefit Canadians. I think all Canadians can get behind and support that kind of investment. I know we certainly do.
You've mentioned the Saskatchewan border security plan. The federal government has announced their plan to beef up border security. But with the potential threat of tariffs coming in on February 1st, does that change the calculus for you? That even though you're implementing more stringent regulations and changes there, that the tariffs are coming anyway?
Yeah, the goal is to not have tariffs. Should they arrive, the goal is to have them removed. So the border security is raised by an issue by the President, raised by an issue by a lot of people that live in this province. So that investment is, although in some ways maybe precipitated by the more recent conversation, is here to stay.
Is there anything that you consider doing specifically here in Saskatchewan that you would be able to do? I'm thinking of a Doug Ford, for example, saying he'd take American visas, which is always controversial.
Yeah, we're not. Our focus is to de-escalate the whole discussion around increased tariffs. We don't want President Trump's tariffs applied to the products that we're shipping into the U.S. In fact, when we're going to engage on why that's harmful to not only us as Canadians, but harmful to Americans and harmful to the North American economy. We're also going to engage with some of our other global partners around the world to ensure that those markets are sound and able to, if we need to divert even more than we are. As I said, we're the least dependent, or one of the least, for sure, dependent provinces on exports to the U.S. That being said, they're our largest trading partners. So, we're not looking at how do we escalate the tariff discussion. We're looking very much at how do we de-escalate the tariff discussion and how do we address some of the concerns that, yes, may have been raised by not only President Trump, but some of his administration. But I think in fairness, many of those concerns have been raised by Canadians as well, and border security is but one example.
BC's Premier called on British Columbians to rethink their travel plans to the U.S. amid the tariff threats. Do you agree with that idea? And would you want people from Saskatchewan to consider where they're spending their money?
Well, sure. There's going to be a financial hit should the tariffs come on, and I'm not going to predispose that they will. There's going to be a financial hit to Saskatchewan residents and Saskatchewan families and Canadian families, and there's going to be very close to an equivalent financial hit to Americans. And so where we spend our money, whether it's on a made in Canada product or a made in the U.S. or made somewhere else product, and that includes tourism, where you fill your vehicle up, where you may stay in a park or go to whatever it is you do to recreate with your spouses and your families. Yeah, sure. Staying in Saskatchewan is always a good idea, not just in times, challenging times like this, but it's always a good idea. Further to that, we have one of the most beautiful provinces that you can find in North America, and much of that beauty. I'm going to put a plug in for the area of the province where I live, which is the northern half of the province, which is certainly not only some of the most beautiful places in Canada, but in the world.
How difficult is it to deal with putting together a budget, because you guys are writing that right now, when you're looking at the possibility of tariffs, when you're looking at the possibility of even more oil drilling in the U.S., possibly lowering the price of oil?
We've had a significant amount of potential variability in almost every budget that I've been involved in for the last, 6-7 years. I mean, when you look at what has occurred over the last 6 or 7 years, it's been challenging to say the least. In particular, when you're trying to estimate what the revenue side of a provincial budget might be. And there's been some challenges on the expense side as well. And you've seen the commitments that we've made in the speech from the throne and in the most recent campaign. And there's a financial investment cost to those that we're going to be moving on. So yeah, no, it's challenging. But I would say that we've faced a number of challenges when it comes to formulating the provincial budget in the last number of years. I wouldn't say this is the largest or the most straightforward and simple, but it certainly is challenging, and it certainly is providing a significant amount of uncertainty into the business, and I would say most importantly, the investment environment in Saskatchewan. We're going to feel, should these tariffs come into play for any length of time, we're going to feel that as Canadians. Americans are going to feel that as well when they fuel up their vehicles and when they go to the grocery store. And so the sooner, if the tariff should come into effect, the sooner that we can have them removed across the board, the quicker and better that we can get back to doing what we do well on this continent.
I suppose you mentioned a few times to take seriously but not literally what the president says. Do you take into face value that he is looking to bring in tariffs on February 21st despite the executive order having those words come back on the
February 1st, I think he said. Yeah, not 20. Yeah. So I think, you know, the last time when it was steel tariffs that were brought in, the ambassador to the U.S. was David McNaughton, who was told that very day that, you know, steel tariffs wouldn't be coming in. I think he had explained that he had been told steel tariffs weren't coming to the media, and it wasn't but a few hours later the president signed tariffs in on steel and aluminum. And so, you know, I'm not going to guess or, you know, get too far into the hypothetical of what may, what won't, what may and when that might happen. But we've been working diligently, I think, alongside the other provinces, all the other provinces, and Alberta has very much been a part of those conversations, and Premier Smith, to ensure that we're prepared. As prepared as we can be should that happen, and you know, engaging to the level that hopefully the tariffs won't come in, and I say that hopefully, but if they do, that we're able to remove them as quickly as possible. That's the goal. When we're not going to be, or at least we're going to be making every attempt to not escalate the discussion around, you know, increased tariffs, broad-based tariffs, dollar-for-dollar tariffs. Canadians lose that broader tariff war, that market access war, and I would say North Americans also will lose if we are into a dollar-for-dollar tariff war with the U.S. There's other countries around the world that have much to gain from that type of an environment, but they aren't the United States of America or Canada or Mexico for that matter.
You mentioned the uncertainty of tariffs and what that can cause. I'm just wondering about your thoughts on the pause of the canola crush proposal here in Regina. That was paused because of market uncertainty, things like that.
Yeah, well, the FCL AGT, that's policy. That's, you know, federal policy around the clean fuel standard, and I think maybe the uncertainty of whether or not that policy will be moving forward into the future. And it was a policy that, yes, it precipitated investment for all refineries, not just FCL. We're looking at significant investment to achieve some of the standards, criteria or parameters that were put out in the clean fuel standard. There's other ways that I think, and I won't speak for FCL or any other refinery, there's other ways. There's uncertainty around the future of the clean fuel standard, but there's also other ways that they're able to reduce the carbon content of the fuel that they produce. And I think that's what you see happening here is, you know, the potential uncertainty of policies that have been brought in that is changing some of the investment decisions specifically to FCL.
How does that affect your plan for growth? Do you have a goal in your plan for growth that has 75% of the canola crush?
Right. Yeah, and so, you know, we have a doubling of the plant capacity at the two plants in Yorkton, Louis Dreyfus and Richardson. We see Cargill building a significant investment just outside of the city here. You know, still will be and continue to be in conversations with, you know, Viterra had announced the plant in Regina here. We continue to engage with Bunge on, you know, what that looks like as we go through the next number of months now that they've found their way through the Competition Bureau process. And we still have our existing capacity. You know, we have plants at Lloydminster, Saskatchewan, and Nipawin, as well as a number of smaller plants across the province. And so I think it's fair to say that we still will meet our 75% crush target here in the province. We were poised to go far beyond that and actually, to some degree, maybe even become a canola importer. And not only the largest canola producer in Canada, but become a canola importer because of the crush capacity that we would have. And we're still, I think, in fairness, would be striving to attract those investments. There's some that are not gone away, but are on pause and can be looked at some point in the future when, if the market changes, if the policy changes, whatever that might be.
Can I get your thoughts on the Bunge acquisition of Viterra?
Sure. Yeah, so it found its way through the Competition Bureau process. Our Ministry of Agriculture had provided a number of recommendations in that process. There's a number of recommendations that have come out of that process as well. We've engaged with Bunge in months gone by. They've assured us that this is an opportunity for Bunge not to find deficiencies, but to actually grow the business, not just in Saskatchewan or Western Canada, but to use the presence that they'll have to grow their business here. And so we continue to engage with them, and they had the Competition Bureau process to find their way through. Now I think they'll be looking at what the opportunities are for the crush plant that was announced by Viterra previously, as they ultimately make a decision whether they're going to continue to move forward with that. And it'll be our hopes that they certainly do. And we've made investments, for example, at the provincial level in water infrastructure to facilitate investments just like that canola crush plant or the one at the Global Transportation Hub that Cargill is building.
What about the concerns from agricultural producers who say they're concerned about this acquisition and the lack of competition that they'll have?
Yeah, there's some safeguards around that, and I think the lack of competition identified as there might be some concerns around port competition with Bunge, and I think Bunge has made some statements with respect to addressing that. We always have concerns with respect to anything that might have a negative or positive impact on the ag industry within the province of Saskatchewan. As I said, with respect to where Bunge is, we've made our recommendations to the Competition Bureau. They've found their way through that process. And we're going to continue to engage with them on the opportunities for this, what would be a very significant investment, likely the largest crush plant in the world, to do what we can to ensure that hopefully that project will move forward like it was announced under Viterra.